Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Shelley Welch, and I'm co-director of the Center of Excellence with CTSI Clinical Trials. I'm going to be presenting today the overview of the Clinical Trials Center of Excellence.
And hello, my name is Tanya Moran, and I'm co-director with Shelley of the Clinical Trials Center of Excellence.
So we'll just jump into to the slides. Just wanted to give an overview of where clinical trials stands at the university currently. So the current context, as many of you may know, there's various groups throughout the university so that do clinical trials. So multiple disparate clinical trial groups with no common governance, policies, or procedures that they must follow. With limited university oversight. And then quality assurance that's variable through the groups. Some groups have a quality assurance team, some do not. And so there's also inconsistency of how regulatory compliance is monitored, as well as inefficient contracting for clinical trial studies. And lastly, there's inconsistent or non-existent, in some cases, performance targets within the university and then within the units themselves. The mission of the Center of Excellence is to provide infrastructure that facilitates participant safety and regulatory compliance while providing efficiencies that drive growth of cutting-edge clinical research at WVU. The goals, you'll see three main goals listed there. One is to provide oversight infrastructure for all health sciences clinical trials, assure regulatory compliance through institution of consistent training, audit and monitoring systems, and improve efficiencies. Here is just a graphic of the structure for the Clinical Trials Center of Excellence. As you see, we'll have some oversight over the services and some oversight over the different units within the university. There on the left are the services that are provided through the Center of Excellence, which include training, internal quality auditing, regulatory audits and monitoring, and Encore clinical trial management system. Optional services include budget development, financial management, regulatory support, including IRB submissions, study coordination, recruitment services, data management, completion of CRFs, and acting as a liaison for the IRB CRO or the sponsor. And there below, you'll see all, not all, but the large institutions here that are doing clinical research. There are others, we just couldn't list them all. But you'll see the Cancer Institute, Heart and Vascular, RNI, the Rockefeller Neuroscience, the pediatric clinical trial groups, and then, you know, there are other departments as well. And I wanted to point out too that while this, the Center of Excellence is underneath the CTSI umbrella, this is a health sciences initiative with support from Dr. Clay Marsh, E. Gordon Gee, and Fred King. So some of the benefits that you'll receive if you're doing clinical trials at the university through the COE will be centralized standard operating procedures, or SOPs, and templates for research conduct. We have those available now. So if your group does not have SOPs on how to conduct research in your unit, we're happy to share those and make those available. and help you work through those so that you have SOPs for your specific unit. Also, we have available FDA or sponsor audit readiness. So if that you get notified ahead of time that there is going to be a sponsor or FDA audit, we can help prepare the unit for that audit in preparation for an on-site audit, which would include reviewing records and making sure that all our ducks are in a row, if you will, before the sponsor or FDA would come in. Encore is going to be required. Encore, for those that don't know, is a clinical trial management system that some groups are currently using, but it's going to be mandatory for everybody to be using Encore in the first of the year in 2020. And so we have Encore support, which would include training and troubleshooting and questions, help with questions in that application. We also have clinicaltrials.gov support. So as you know, many of you know that there is requirements for certain trials to be registered and data to be reported on clinicaltrials.gov. We have supporting documents to help guide investigators and their research staff through that process and can help facilitate that process throughout the university. We also have personnel training. This would look more like research study coordinator and regulatory research assistant training on a various topics through our toolkit series that we do. And also we have instituted new hire orientation training geared towards people that are new to the university so that they understand how to conduct research at the university. We also have internal regulatory monitoring and auditing that will be taking place as well. And that's meant to identify processes that may need some improvement internally in support of, perhaps an external and being audit ready at all times. We can provide IND/IDE support if you need to write any of those. We have some experience with helping to complete that process. And lastly, improved contract efficiency in partnership with legal. And we'll get into how that will happen a little bit later, but they've agreed that legal has agreed to, if there's a question about a contract, to process those questions and move those contracts through within a couple weeks, whereas now they may linger for quite some time. So we've had dedication and conversations with legal to help improve the efficiencies of contracts stalling and not being moved forward. One of the initiatives out of the Center of Excellence, we've developed a Principal Investigators Academy, really aimed towards mentoring and educating and content around new investigators or early stage investigators that may have not done clinical research in their career or perhaps at WVU and need some more information about what it is to do clinical trials here at WVU as far as a principal investigator goes. And so you'll see the three pillars there of the PI's Academy. There's structured online curriculum that is provided in Seoul, and there's formal mentoring that will take place, and then quarterly dinner meetings. We had the kickoff of the PI Academy in October, right as we were kicking off the Center of Excellence, and had a dinner at that time, and then just recently brought in the FDA, an FDA speaker to talk about PI responsibilities. That was held in November. And we are planning for our the first quarter of 2020. We're developing that topic as we speak to what that quarterly dinner meeting will be. If you like more information about the PI Academy, the information can be found on the CTSI website. There's a tab for the Clinical Trials Center of Excellence, and then under resources, you can find a PI Academy link, and it will give you information about how to access SOL and information about the Academy. As I mentioned, the online curriculum will be housed or is housed in SOL. And so this is a snapshot of the SOL site with various modules and various trainings that are there. If participants for the PI Academy finishes the online curriculum, a certificate from the Academy will be provided. The modules that are available currently are regulatory guidelines and best practices, how to set up a study, implementation of a study, and study closeout. Not all the modules are, not all the trainings within a module are required. There are 2 to 3 trainings in each with optional trainings as well. So let me talk a little bit about how the COE registration is going to take place. As of October the 15th, any new trials that are going to happen on the Health Sciences campus will be required to register with the Clinical Trial Center of Excellence. And we have a website that the registration is taking place in. And to get that link, it's there on the slide, but also you can go to the CTSI website, and there's a Start Here registration for clinical trials that will link you to the application. So what trials need to be registered? We are only registering trials that have not started, and also trials that meet the definition of a clinical trial according to the NIH, which this slide depicts. So it's really a study with human participants prospectively assigned to 1 or more interventions to evaluate the effects of those interventions on outcomes. So you'll see the 4 questions there that help to determine whether it's a clinical trial or not. Every question here, these 4 questions, have to be answered yes in order for it to be considered a clinical trial. So if one of the answers is no, then you don't have to register that clinical trial. So it has to involve human participants prospectively assigned, have an intervention that outcome is either biomedical or behavioral. We'll take a look at the registration site. This is a snapshot of the registration site. There are several components, but really not very long of a registration process, less than 15 questions as far as the information that is needed. We'll gather information about the principal investigator and basic study information, such as the IRB number and the protocol. An upload of the protocol is required, and an upload of the contract is requested, though not required. And then we have a series of risk questions to assess the risk. And so we'll, throughout answering the questions, we'll determine whether it's low, minor, moderate, or high risk. The registration, I will say, can be done by the principal investigator or somebody on his or her behalf. but ultimately the PI must approve the registration. So there is a two-step process in the registration, so that the requester would complete it. It would go to the PI to review and approve. And then once that PI approved, the registration would be sent to the COE within the system. This graphic depicts the risk assessment questions. So we can go through those so that you understand the risk points associated with each answer. If it's an industry-sponsored trial, the risk point is 0, as well as cooperative type trials. An investigator-initiated trial has a point of 1. And if the trial is greater than minimal risk, there is also a 1 point for that. If it's an NIH-sponsored trial, it is a -1 in the thoughts that NIH has vetted the trial very thoroughly through their process of granting the funds to do that clinical trial. If there's no FDA approval for the investigational product, there's 2 points. And if it's yes, but the approval is for the same indication, if it's no, it's not the same indication, there's also a score of 2. If the trial is truly first in human, that would be an automatic 4, which would raise the risk, as you can imagine. First in human trials do. If the investigator is responsible for the IND or the IDE, there's a risk score of 2. And if the trial sponsor has denied indemnification, there are also, as you could understand, risks associated with that, and that would raise that to a 4. And then if the principal investigator on the trial has not done 4 or more clinical trials, it would add a point to the risk assessment as well. And I would like to point out that the risk assessment is really aimed at assessing the risk to the university, not necessarily the risk to the participant. Really the focus is to the university. So if the trial, once registers with the COE, scores 4 or more, those will be reviewed by a committee called the Risk Assessment Committee, or RAC committee. There are timelines that the review will happen so that it doesn't delay you moving forward with the trial. The RAC committee has committed to 10 working days for the review to happen. The review happens via email, and to tell you who is on the committee, just so that you're aware of who the trials will be reviewed by, there are 4 people that will be in the RAC committee. The vice president, the associate vice president, clinical and translational science and director of CTSI is Dr. Sally Hodder. That will be one of the RAC committee. And she is associated with, of course, the health sciences. The vice president of clinical programs, School of Medicine at WVU is Steve Hoffman. The assistant vice president and senior clinical operations counsel for the West Virginia University Health System is Sanita Kellemeyer. And last on the RAC is the deputy general counsel for innovation and research at WVU, and that's Rossi Wiles. So those 4 people will be considered the RAC, and they will review every trial that scores 4 or more. So if the trial is deemed to have unacceptable risk coming out of the RAC after review, there is an appeals process that is available. you would just need to indicate that to the Center of Excellence, and then an appeals process can happen. And the PI or the study staff in support of the PI can present the case to the appeals committee. And so the appeals committee includes the RAC members and 3 other institutional leaders. And those 3 other institutional leaders are the Vice President and Executive Dean for Health Sciences at WVU and Dean of the School of Medicine, which is Dr. Clay Marsh. The Vice President and General Counsel for the WVU Health Systems, which is Jessica Alsop, and the General Counsel at WVU, which is Stephanie Taylor. So those, the appeals committee would meet in person for the PI to present why the university should move forward with the trial. I will say that there is no second appeal. Once the appeal decision is made, that decision is final. So I think that goes through the registration process. Starting in the first quarter of 2020, there will be a registration fee of $975 per clinical trial. And looking at that fee, we broke it down into the payment sources for the fees. For the industry clinical trials, that should be captured as a pass-through cost. And so we want to make sure that people understand that that $975 should be an acceptable fee to the sponsor. If you need documentation about what that fee is, you can contact us, but those should be put in your budgets as you're negotiating them now for industry-sponsored clinical trials. Any trial that's NIH funded or government funded will be paid by the indirects, your F&A. That will be paid by the F&A cost and not come out of the operations budget for that clinical trial. CTSI pilots and clinical scholars, CTSI is going to pay the fee. And then any unfunded investigator-initiated or investigator-sponsored trial without direct cost, each department would be expected to pay the $975. Just wanted to give you some of the COE resources. As I mentioned before, we are offering new hire orientation to WVU research personnel. It's really more geared towards not the PI, but people doing the clinical trials, research study coordinators, regulatory associates, accountants, anybody, research assistants that are doing clinical trials at WVU. And to take advantage of those orientations, you can contact the COE, and Debbie Lee is the coordinator for training and can help facilitate enrollment into one of those classes. Oh, data manager. I did forget data manager in that list of target audiences there. And we also offer encore training for non-cancer personnel. For cancer personnel, Layla is still the encore resource in the CRU. So if you have yet to take advantage of encore, please contact us and we can set you up with encore and set you up with the proper training so that you can begin to use encore as a clinical trial management system. And then we have ongoing our clinical trial toolkit series that's associated with the CTSI, and all the presentations are recorded and are available on our YouTube channel. And there are various trainings you're free to look at those, or if you need a list of those, we can provide you a list of those trainings. So the timeline for implementation for the Center of Excellence, the registration is required since October 15th, 2019. And those are, let me reiterate, those are for new trials that are moving forward. Current trials that are currently enrolling are not required to be registered. The Encore management system is going to be a requirement starting in January of 2020. And then the fee is waived right at the moment as well. And that will be beginning the first quarter of 2020. That $975 fee will be required in the first of the year in the first quarter. And lastly, I'd like to just leave Tanya and myself contact information there. Please feel free to reach out with any questions or comments. We look forward to working with you. Thank you very much for your attention.